The Sacramento Kings are always going to have their non-believers. And all I ask is that you don't be lazy about it. Present reasons for why the Sacramento Kings will regress that aren't just these three goalpost moving new talking points that I've seen over and over again this offseason. I'll address them right here on Locked On Kings.
You are Locked On Kings, your daily Sacramento Kings podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, it is that time. Time for another episode of Locked On Kings.
Hello and welcome into Locked On Kings, your podcast hub for Sacramento Kings coverage all offseason long. And today's episode is brought to you by Jase Medical. Empower yourself when you purchase a Jase case, providing you with a personal supply of 5 antibiotics that treat 50 plus infections. Get yours today at jasemedical.com. That's JASE Medical.com. My name is Matt George. I have the privilege of being your host here. I'm a Sacramento sports anchor and reporter for ABC 10 News. And look, I know that it's going to take more than one good season, more than the beam being lit for the jokes about the Sacramento Kings to disappear. And I expect those jokes from fans that aren't really paying attention or from people that have only really known the Sacramento Kings to be bad, to be a laughingstock. I expect that from them. I don't necessarily expect that from analysts and people who are looking towards and projecting towards next season and saying, oh yeah, I expect the Sacramento Kings to regress. Now, to be clear here, to make this very, very clear, regression is very possible for the Sacramento Kings. I'm certainly not going to start this podcast by saying there is no possible way that the Kings regress. I wouldn't put my money on it. I'm very confident in the team that the Sacramento Kings put out. I'm very confident that this team will both improve by spending simply more time together and improve by the additions that they made this offseason. I'm very confident that Mike Brown and this Kings team is moving in the right direction. So no, I do not think this Kings team is going to regress. But regression regression is subjective. You could look at like a technical regression if the Sacramento Kings were to win only 46 games this season instead of winning 48. And let's say that's a 5th seed. Yeah, they regressed in terms of they lost or they won less games. They won fewer games and they're a lower seed. I guess you could call that regression, but if the Kings go into the playoffs as a 5th seed with 46 wins and win a playoff series and advance further in the playoffs than they did last year, then you could call that progress. Like regression is subjective. So there probably going to be some minor ways or certain ways that the Kings regress, and there are going to be certain ways that the Kings improve. I highly, highly doubt that the Kings are going to massively improve to a level that we're hopeful for here in Sacramento, which is becoming a championship contender. It's possible, but I doubt that's going to happen. I'm realistic in that sense. I also doubt that the Kings are going to massively regress and fall off to a level that I see so many people predicting or suggesting, and they really are just basing that off of these new lazy talking points that are either clean and easy examples of goalpost moving the goalpost, which is essentially, okay, this is what the Kings need to do. And they accomplish that. Well, now the Kings need to do this. And then the Kings accomplish that. Well, now the Kings need to do this. It's just making that goal harder and harder and harder to achieve and not acknowledging when the Sacramento Kings initially achieve that goal in the first place. That's goalpost moving. And I see that a lot. And it's not just that. It's quite frankly, like these ideas and these talking points presented and discussed by people that clearly only watched Sacramento Kings basketball when it was the playoffs. So when you're looking at and listening to these pundits talk about the Sacramento Kings, and I'm not expecting everyone to think and acknowledge the Kings are great and think that the Kings are going to be fantastic and know Sacramento Kings basketball to the level that we know and follow it here in Sacramento itself. Like, I don't expect that. I understand they have to watch all 30 teams, and specifically they're watching like the Los Angeles Lakers, the Boston Celtics, maybe the Golden State Warriors. Like, they're watching a select few teams consistently and then sprinkling in those other teams as they come up on their timeline or as these big teams are playing them, or if they make the playoffs, or if there's a big storyline attached to them, whatever. Like, I understand that. I know that. When you're looking at these national pundits, though, and you're listening to these people, they may have a podcast, they may be writing an article. It might be your fellow fan, whoever you're listening to. You don't have to have a credential to know what you're talking about. You don't have to have thousands of followers on social media or any kind of reputation to know what you're talking about. There are plenty of Kings fans, plenty of NBA bloggers who are very, very plugged in, plenty of NBA fans, period, who are very smart, have high basketball IQs, and are able to kind of break down situations and make good logical arguments. So I'm not saying only listen to national pundits or only listen to people who know what they're talking about, who have a following or who have access. That's ridiculous. But when you're listening to someone, when you're listening to them break down the Sacramento Kings or share with you why they believe the Sacramento Kings aren't going to be good or are going to regress, ask yourself two questions. One, do they reference more than the playoff series? Because if they're just talking about, look what the Golden State Warriors did to them, look what Domantas Sabonis did in the playoffs, look what Harrison Barnes did in the playoffs, look what Kevin Huerter did in the playoffs. If that's all they have, that's all they saw. They didn't see what the Kings did over the course of the regular season. Maybe they've seen box scores and they've seen numbers and they're trying to find a way to undermine those numbers. They didn't watch De'Aaron Fox in the fourth quarter. They didn't watch how Keegan Murray broke the record for three-pointers as a rookie. And not necessarily that he did it, but how he did it. They didn't watch what Mike Brown was able to do to turn this team around. They didn't see any of that. They only watched the playoffs. So one, are they referencing more than just the playoffs themselves? Number one. And number two, is their argument based on the past, meaning seasons before, the playoff drought before last year's team? And or are their arguments based off of what other teams are doing, not what the Sacramento Kings are doing? Ask yourself those two questions. If the answer to those two questions is no, they're not referencing more than the playoffs, and they're basing everything off of the past, or they're basing everything off of what other teams are doing and not necessarily what the Sacramento Kings are. Their arguments against the Kings feature everything else but the Kings. They're not worth listening to. They don't know what they're talking about. It's not worth getting upset or getting frustrated about that. The low-hanging fruit, understand this. The low-hanging fruit of the last 16 seasons, the 16 playoff-less seasons, the playoff drought, the longest playoff drought in NBA history, the Kings being a laughingstock, that low-hanging fruit is gone. It no longer applies. And so many people have only known the Kings to be a team that doesn't make the playoffs, Kings to be losers. So they don't know how to handle and how to cover the Sacramento Kings being good. They don't understand it. They haven't watched enough to be able to put together more of an argument than, well, it's the Kings. The Kings they're going to find a way to Kings. Kings are going to Kings. And I'm not just saying this from like people on Twitter. You're seeing this and hearing this from people on NBA TV, people on ESPN, reading it in articles, people going, well, the Kings aren't going to be as good as they were last season because it's the Kings. I mean, like last year was a great, cute story, but the Kings are gonna Kings, or they're not going to be able to do this, not going to be able to do that. And that brings me into the three most common goalpost moving talking points, the new talking points that I've seen and heard and read analysts, social media members, fans, whoever. These are the three most common reasons for why the Kings will regress or why the Kings aren't going to be good that I've seen out there. And I guarantee you, if you have a conversation with anybody about who believes the Kings are going to be bad, they will bring up, if not at least one, all three of these talking points. Number one, the Kings will not replicate their injury luck from last season. The Sacramento Kings were extremely lucky last year. They stayed healthy all season long. They were far more healthy than any other team in the league. They will not be that healthy again. They need to be lucky to be that healthy again. Now, to some extent, I've discussed this offseason. One, I think the Kings have done a really good job to add depth to help with any kind of injury issues at every position that they have this upcoming season. That being said, you lose De'Aaron Fox or Domantas Sabonis or both, knock on wood, God forbid, for an extended period of time. Yeah, lots of teams are not, like the Kings aren't overcoming that. Lots of teams are not overcoming losing one or both their stars for an extended period of time. But to undermine what the Sacramento Kings did last season, to move the goalposts, to say, oh, it was a cute year, but the only reason why the Kings won 48 games, the only reason why the Kings were a third seed is because they stayed healthy. They were lucky to stay way healthier than the rest of their teams. That's bogus. That's nonsense. And again, those are people who aren't watching and aren't following what happened last season. Because if they were following, they would realize that Domantas Sabonis played through an injured thumb for the vast majority of the season. I believe he injured his thumb back in December. He played all the way through the remainder of the season and the playoffs with a thumb that many thought was going to require surgery and he was going to miss extended time. He played through all of that. That's not injury luck. That's just being tough. How many players around the league, how many stars, all NBA players around the league hurt that thumb and then are sitting and resting for 3 weeks or getting that procedure done or taking their time coming back and are being load managed over the course of the rest of the season? How many teams are doing that? But those are teams that we just exalt as better than the Sacramento Kings because they have more, better, bigger stars on their roster. But those stars don't play more than 45, 50 games. And half the time it's because those stars are resting for the playoffs. And then they get to the playoffs and either suck or get hurt because they're injury-prone players. Domantas Sabonis played through injury the majority of the year and was a damn good player. And I am not using that injury as an excuse for how he performed in the playoffs. He struggled in the playoffs because of what the Golden State Warriors did to him, not because he was hurt. And I promise you, Domantas Sabonis is not going to talk about his injury and his thumb for why he struggled that mightily in the playoffs. De'Aaron Fox broke his pinky finger in the playoffs, played through all that. Clearly was not the same player as the first few games when he was dominating, but still played through that. And that was not the only injury that De'Aaron Fox faced over the course of the season. De'Aaron Fox was banged up multiple times over the course of the year. In fact, De'Aaron Fox has spent his entire career playing through injuries, playing banged up. He's tough. He's not lucky. He's just out there playing through it, fighting through it. Keegan Murray battled through injuries. There are key pieces of the Sacramento Kings played through injuries. It wasn't that the Kings were lucky to stay healthy. It was that their players were tough enough to see it through and didn't sit out games because they knew they needed all hands on deck if they were going to secure that third seed, if they were going to win as many games as possible. The Kings knew that last season they needed everybody to be as successful as they were. That was their only chance. So players played through. They fought through pain almost the entire season. So do not undermine what those players were able to accomplish. Do not undermine what the Sacramento Kings were able to do last season by saying they were lucky to stay healthy. At one point or another, almost every single starter on that roster dealt with some kind of injury and fought through it. That's why that starting lineup played more games together and more minutes together than any other starting lineup in the league. Not because they were all wrapped in bubble wrap and perfectly shiny healthy day one through game 82 and into the playoffs. That's not what the case was at all. They just fought through those injuries. And full credit to the Kings training staff. Full credit to that training staff for keeping this team right, for keeping them healthy. Full credit to someone like Harrison Barnes, who despite being 30 years old, played all 82 games and all 7 games of the playoffs. Why don't we give them credit for that? Why don't we acknowledge how they were able to take care of themselves? And it wasn't because Mike Brown was taking it easy on them, because the Sacramento Kings practiced harder and practiced more than almost any other team in the league. So miss me with this whole the Kings were lucky to stay healthy garbage. That's undermining what the Kings did. They had injuries to key guys. They just fought through them while your stars were sitting and resting so much that the NBA had to create a new rule that says now not 2 stars can rest at the same time together. Looking at you, Los Angeles Clippers. All right, that's just talking point 1. Talking point 2. Lack of offseason moves / the Domantas Sabonis extension was a bad decision. These two, the second one in particular, the Sabonis thing, we'll get to in a second. That's just wild to me. But people who look at the Sacramento Kings, look at the cap space that they had, look at the roster that they have, and saying, yeah, the Kings just decided to run it back. They didn't get better. Like, they're just copying and pasting what they did last year. They're not going to get better. Because A team can't possibly get better simply by spending more time together. Not that we didn't just watch the Denver Nuggets, who stuck with what they did for years. We didn't just watch them win an NBA championship. Let's throw that out the window. The Sacramento Kings didn't get better. They just ran it back. They just kept the same group together. Bringing back Harrison Barnes, should have got Kyle Kuzma. They didn't get better. The Sacramento Kings didn't get better. Oh, never mind. They added the EuroLeague MVP. Never mind, they added that for just a second-round draft pick. That's all it took to get his rights. Never mind that. Never mind the addition of Chris Duarte for next to nothing, when Chris Duarte's best time as a player so far in his career was when he was playing with Domantas Sabonis in Indiana. Never mind that. Never mind all of those moves. Never mind JaVale McGee, a player that fits perfectly into what the Sacramento Kings need out of that backup center position. Hey, never mind all that. The Sacramento Kings didn't make any moves. They didn't get better this offseason. And then the major move that they did make, extending Domantas Sabonis. Now, all of a sudden, that's a bad thing. This is the biggest example of goalpost moving I could possibly give. Because remember, when the Kings traded for Domantas Sabonis, when they traded Tyrese Haliburton for Sabonis a couple of years ago, which is crazy to think it's almost a couple of years ago now. What was the major talking point? It was the talking point on this show. The Sacramento Kings have to convince Domantas Sabonis to sign an extension, or they traded Tyrese Haliburton away for a 2-season rental. That's all they did. The Kings have to get Sabonis to re-sign, or this was a terrible trade for Monte McNair. Not only did they get Domantas Sabonis to re-sign, they did it without him testing the open market. He didn't even try to look elsewhere. He didn't even try to get more money elsewhere. He said, yeah, I choose Sacramento. Sign the dotted line. Let's restructure this contract. Let's get the deal done. I want to be here. I want to stick with the Sacramento Kings. I believe in what we're doing here. They convinced an all-NBA center to do that. An all-NBA center decided, I'm re-signing with the Sacramento Kings. I'm not even going to test the open market. And now suddenly that's a bad thing. Now it's, who were the Kings competing against for that contract? Was anybody else going to give Sabonis that kind of money? You're damn right they would have. If Domantas Sabonis made it to next summer, playing the exact same way that he did last season, and even with a slight regression this year, which again is not going to happen, even though so many national pundits think so. You get to next offseason. Teams are throwing money at Sabonis. Teams are harassing Domantas Sabonis' agent. You're damn right somebody would have tried to scoop Sabonis from the Sacramento Kings. The Kings getting Sabonis to re-sign was a massive win for this organization and secured the biggest asterisk or biggest question mark of the Tyrese Haliburton trade. Now all of a sudden it's a bad thing. Oh, but the Sacramento Kings didn't improve. Miss me with that nonsense. That's talking point number 2. Number 3. Other teams in the West got better. The Sacramento Kings simply can't compete with those teams. An argument against the Kings that is completely based on everything but the Sacramento Kings. Now I understand. Look at what the Phoenix Suns are doing. Amazing. Great. Look at what the Golden State Warriors are doing. Maybe it'll work. Chris Paul's awesome. He's had a phenomenal career. He's also like in his mid-30s. The average age of that roster is like 35 or 36 years old. That's a team that you could probably question injuries, not a team with the average age of 25, 26 like the Sacramento Kings. Maybe that's called being a smart GM. Maybe Monte McNair knows, hey, I'm building a roster of everybody on the same age timeline that stays relatively healthy. That's smart. I don't know if the Golden State Warriors are going to work. That is a boom or bust team. Look at the entire Pacific Division. The Los Angeles Lakers absolutely got better, and I fully acknowledge that. I hate it. I absolutely hate it, but I fully acknowledge the Los Angeles Lakers got way, way better, and I appreciate and admire what they did, especially the pickup of Gabe Vincent. The Los Angeles Clippers, if they can stay healthy, wonderful. They have Russell Westbrook. They have Paul George. They have Kawhi Leonard. 2 out of those 3 players are known to be injury prone, and the third in Russell Westbrook has battled injuries in the past too. What about the rest of that team? I mean, for some reason, we all of a sudden just think now that the Dallas Mavericks are going to have Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving together for a season. Now the Dallas Mavericks have to be put back into the fold. The New Orleans Pelicans, their star can't play more than 30 games a season. Hasn't played for over a year in Zion. And that team, we're not questioning that team. That team is expected to be good. The Minnesota Timberwolves are a laughingstock. The Minnesota Timberwolves have made dumb move after dumb move. Anthony Edwards is phenomenal and exalted to be the star here, and rightfully so, because he's an absolute beast. But the Minnesota Timberwolves, they can't hold a candle to what the Sacramento Kings are doing right now. Like, why are we focusing so much on other teams in the Western Conference and saying that because they got better, the Sacramento Kings simply can't compete? Why is it that those teams can get better by adding in talent and bringing players in that have never played before together, or bringing players in that are older? But a Sacramento Kings team that's on the same age timeline that has now spent or is just about to spend a calendar year together in the second year of Mike Brown as the head coach, with the entire coaching staff returning, even though that coaching staff should have been plucked apart if there were smart general managers around the league. Like, why can't that team get better? Why can't that team improve? Plus, like I mentioned earlier, they added a EuroLeague MVP. They added depth at basically every position. Why can't that team get better? The three major talking points for why the Sacramento Kings will regress are filled with holes. They're filled with holes, and they're presented by multiple people that don't know what else to say because they haven't watched Kings basketball enough to say anything else. Lazy talking points. If you're going to present to me a reason, an argument why the Kings will regress this season, bring me something different. Bring me something backed up with fact. Bring me something that includes the context of last season, not just the playoffs or the 16 years of hell before that. Because I'll listen. I'm not pretending that the Kings are the best team in the league. I know this team has holes. I know defensively they could still be a nightmare. I know. I'm not dumb. But bring me something that's not just the same recycled nonsense that just shows that you haven't watched Kings basketball and you're not aware of how good this team was and how good they still can become. Today's episode of the Locked On Kings podcast, like I mentioned at the top of the show, is brought to you by Jase Medical. Everyone should be empowered to care for themselves and their loved ones during the unexpected. That's why Jase Medical offers the Jase case. The Jase case provides 5 life-saving antibiotics for emergency use and gives you a peace of mind so that you are not just hoping that you have access to medication in an emergency, you actually have it available to you. Jase Medical makes sure you have the medication in hand. Jase Medical is simple. They handle everything from the online evaluation to licensed pharmacy medication delivery and ongoing consultation and care. Don't get caught unprepared, especially after all the years that we've just gone through, right? Get $20 off these life-saving antibiotics today from Jase Medical by using the code LOCKEDON at checkout at jasemedical.com. That's JASE medical.com. If you missed the last episode of Locked On Kings, I was joined by my good friend, former host of this podcast, Jason Ross, of course, on the Kings radio broadcast team. And one of the things that Jason and I discussed, we did like some Sacramento Kings fill in the blanks, and they were a lot of fun. And I encourage you to go and listen to that and kind of join the conversation on that. But one of the conversations that we had, or one of the fill in the blanks, was like the award that the Kings are most likely to compete for next season. And Jason had his answer. I had my answer. And it got me thinking, like, out of all of the awards, and we're talking like individual awards, not really like team awards or anything like that, but of all the individual awards, like, which ones do I think the Sacramento Kings are going to have a legit chance of competing for again this season? So I wrote them down. My answer to that question with J. Ross was Most Improved Player Award, Keegan Murray. Like, I think this is the award that the Kings have the absolute best chance at, other than Jason's answer, maybe. But like, I think Keegan Murray is going to have more than enough opportunity to shine in a way that makes him the most improved player. Will he do enough? Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. But Keegan Murray is going to get his touches. He's going to get his opportunity. The most improved player award is something very, very achievable for Keegan Murray and the Sacramento Kings this season. Coach Jason Ross's answer was clutch player of the year, De'Aaron Fox again. Why can't De'Aaron repeat what he did last season? What's going to change? What would have to change is his shot making gets worse, because defenses aren't going to be able to stop Fox, aren't going to be able to stop what he was able to do. Fox got anywhere he wanted on the court at will during the fourth quarter. That's why he was so unstoppable. It wasn't that he was making ridiculous shots. He was just getting to that same spot on the floor, particularly that pull-up elbow jumper, and he was knocking that down game in and game out. Now, he did hit, of course, some clutch threes, the over half-court 3 in Orlando and the pull-up 3 in Chicago. Like, he did have moments like that too, but for the most part, De'Aaron Fox's clutch scoring came from that quick first step pull-up jumper that defenses have to give him because he's so damn fast. If you play him up tight, he's going to blow by you and get to the rim. You have to back off him, and he's going to hit that shot over the top of you every single time. So why can't De'Aaron Fox win Clutch Player of the Year again? I think he's going to be in top contention for it, and he absolutely should be. So that was J. Ross's answer. That was a good answer. Sixth Man of the Year. I think Malik Monk is going to finish in top 3 for Sixth Man of the Year voting. His role with the Sacramento Kings this season is significant. Now, where I don't think the Kings have a chance of winning Sixth Man of the Year is like in anybody but Malik, right? If it was like a Sasha Vezenkov or something like that, like I don't have faith in any kind of Sixth Man of the Year victory for anybody that's not named Malik Monk. Like this is Malik's award, and in order for Malik to win this award, it's asking a lot of him. Like I think his scoring has to go up off of the bench. And I think he has to be like an undeniable, he needs to be on the floor during the fourth quarter type of player too. Like, I don't know if he's going to be able to do it with how the Sacramento Kings, the amount of talent that the Kings have on their roster and what the Kings ask from Malik coming off the bench. I don't know if that's going to be enough for him to win Sixth Man of the Year. I think there'll be probably another sixth man or two in the league somewhere that'll probably score more than him because that's their role, is just to come in and score. Malik's role is to come in and facilitate, run the offense at times, push the tempo, score, pass, sometimes rebound. Like, I think Malik's being asked a lot more, so maybe he won't win Sixth Man of the Year, but I expect him to be in contention. I do also expect De'Aaron Fox and Domantas Sabonis to once again be in contention for all NBA teams, and both of them to definitely be in contention for All-Stars. And what I mean by this time is I'm not talking De'Aaron Fox getting in as an All-Star reserve again. That ain't happening. That don't do it for me. Like if De'Aaron Fox is going to get in, it's because De'Aaron Fox deserves to get in absolutely 100%. And he's not some kind of injury replacement nonsense. Like that was cute last year or whatever. That was also BS last year. Like De'Aaron Fox should have been an all-star. Absolutely. And that optics matters to me. It may not matter to Fox. It might not matter to anybody else. It matters to me because De'Aaron didn't deserve to get in by technicality because someone else couldn't play. De'Aaron Fox was absolutely one of the best guards, as the All-NBA team reflected appropriately last season, and he deserves the All-Star recognition based off that too. I think the Kings will have 2 All-Stars again this year. I think they will, in both De'Aaron Fox and Domantas Sabonis. Here are the awards though that I'm out on. Like I don't think, it's not that I don't think the Kings have people that are capable of winning these awards. It's that the circumstances for them to win these awards are just asking for expecting a little too much. Number 1, Coach of the Year. Mike Brown is the unanimous Coach of the Year for the first time in NBA history. Congratulations to Mike Brown. He absolutely deserves that. And yes, he should, by normal standards, do more than enough to be in the Coach of the Year conversation again. Except, in order to win Coach of the Year 2 times in a row, you know what needs to happen? The Kings need to win 60 games. The Kings need to be the absolute number 1 seed. That's what needs to happen for Mike Brown to win Coach of the Year. In fact, that's what needs to happen for Monte McNair to win Executive of the Year again. So both these awards, the Kings have already won. So they're capable of winning them. But to repeat as Coach of the Year and Executive of the Year, like the Kings have to blow everybody out of the water. If we thought last year's team was fun and Light the Beam was great, like this year's team would have to explode in a way that we haven't really seen from a second-year team in a long time. We're talking about a team that takes the world by storm, that is absolutely 100% undeniable. That is the only way that voters give Coach of the Year to Mike Brown and Executive of the Year to Monte McNair again. And I can almost promise you that Coach of the Year being unanimous, Mike Brown, or maybe any coach, will never do that again. Mike Brown certainly would not win unanimous Coach of the Year 2 times in a row. Like that would be getting into video game status of the Kings never losing a game. That's what that would take. And then finally, a couple more. MVP. If anybody's going to win MVP on this Kings roster, it's De'Aaron Fox, right? Is he capable of winning MVP? I think so. I think De'Aaron Fox could put up MVP caliber numbers. Will the Sacramento Kings win enough with Fox putting up those caliber numbers? I'm not saying that the Kings wouldn't win because Fox was trying too hard for his own numbers. That's not what I'm saying at all. At all. What I'm saying is, in order for the Kings to have an MVP, De'Aaron Fox would have to average probably 30 plus points a game. And the Kings would also have to be, again, an over 50 win team, maybe not as high as like the 60 wins and absolute number one seed by a wide margin in order for Mike Brown to win Coach of the Year and Monty to win Executive of the Year again. But De'Aaron Fox and the Sacramento Kings would have to be a above and beyond a great team for him to win MVP. A lot of that is just kind of the Sacramento effect on Fox's career too. Like he would have to be undeniable. And finally, Rookie of the Year. Colby Jones isn't going to win it. Sasha Vezenkov is the only chance the Kings have at winning it. And I've discussed this before and I'll say it again. Sasha's not going to get enough touches to win that award compared to Scoot and compared to Wembanyama and other amazing rookies in this class. He's just not going to. And that's okay. His role isn't going to be to get that many opportunities. His role is going to be to come in and be an important floor stretching scorer off of the bench and rebounder. Like that's what Sasha's role is going to be. And I guarantee you Sasha prefers to win over winning Rookie of the Year because the Rookie of the Year is probably going to play for a bad team. Really quickly before we wrap up, because I saw this comment, and I actually got an email about this, and I saw this comment in a comment section recently too. Next Monday is Sacramento Kings Media Day. I've attended Media Day basically every single year over the past 7-8 seasons that I've been covering the team. Media Day is a blast. It's a lot of fun. It's also a whirlwind of chaos for media, certainly for players and coaches. Basically, we go into the Kings practice facility. There are different stations all the way around the room. It's where they record all their stuff that you see on the Jumbotron. They go out into the main arenas where they record their badass hype videos and them like flexing and fire in the background and stuff for their intros and things like that. They do segments for NBC that they'll play over the course of the season. And then there's one station where they come over and do a media scrum. That's where I'll be with all the rest of the media. So I will have that Monday a Locked On Kings podcast episode after Media Day wraps up that'll feature all of the best sound bites from everybody from Media Day. And we talk to everybody. We talk to every single player on the roster, usually. We'll talk to Coach Brown. We'll probably talk to Monty McNair. I don't know if we'll talk to any other of the coaches, but I would love to talk to Jordy Fernandez. It's a really, really cool time. It's a really fun time. And I can promise you on the Locked On Kings podcast, I'll take you into Media Day and you'll hear all of the best sound from everybody who's speaking. Promise you that. So that will happen coming next Monday after Kings Media Day. And then after Media Day, training camp begins. And as a media member, I have the privilege of being able to go into training camp. Now, Mike Brown and the Kings let us in right at the very end. So sometimes we see a lot of stuff. Sometimes we see nothing. Mike is very, very smart, and the Kings are very smart about what they reveal versus what they don't. The one thing I'm looking for and hoping for is that we get to see some scrimmages, so I get to see what kind of lineup pairings Mike is looking at. But no matter what, every single day that I go to training camp, and I'm planning on being there for every single one, I will have a podcast episode after that with hopefully some clips from what I'm seeing in training camp, and then the players that we talk to and Coach Brown that we talk to at training camp, and then just my analysis of what I'm seeing, what I'm observing while I'm there. So that's all coming next week with Media Day and training camp beginning. So make sure you stick it right here on Locked On Kings. I'll give you full coverage and full perspective on all of that. Appreciate your support here. As always on the Locked On Kings podcast, you want to respond to anything that we talked about. If you want to provide an argument for why the Kings will regress or not be as good, that avoids those low-hanging fruit or goalpost moving talking points like I brought up earlier. If you want to present something different that we can discuss, you might be right. Not saying you're going to be wrong, and I'm certainly not going to yell and scream. I did kind of yell and scream at those other talking points, so sorry about that. But I'm not going to yell and scream at you and call you dumb simply because you think or you don't believe in the Kings as much as I do. I'm not going to do something like that. I don't believe in that. But we can have, of course, a good discussion about why you think the Kings will or could regress. Let's talk about it. Let's talk our way through it. We have time to kill, certainly. We got to get to next week. So please feel free to send those to me on Twitter at MattGeorgeSack. You can email me, mattgeorgesports@gmail.com, or leave your thoughts in the YouTube comment section down below. Got more content coming for you this week, so stay tuned for that. Appreciate your support as always. Can't wait to have you join me on the next episode of Locked On Kings. Until then, my name is Matt George. You've been listening to the Locked On Kings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network.